Hello, and welcome to today's session. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Grote, staff engineer here at VMware. Those of you who've heard me speak live know that I have an analogy that I love to use. See, years ago, when I was a kid, I had a 1973 Chevy Nova, and I loved that car, but it only had two really core problems. Well, aside from the upholstery, but that's another story. It had two key mechanical problems. Number one, the fuel gauge was busted. And number two, the speedometer cable had broken. Now, this presented two really specific issues for me. Number one, I had no idea how fast I was going. And number two, I really didn't know how much longer I could go that speed. So whether we realize it or not, when we're looking at a vSphere infrastructure or any technical infrastructure, that's really what we have. We have a car that has no gauges. This is where vRealize operations and operations management integrates and becomes so important. If you've ever driven a car without gauges, and some of you have, then you know what I'm talking about. And we'd be the first ones to jump up and say, yes, we need monitoring, we need insight, and we need those gauges so that we know what to do going forward. Now, when we're talking about something like NSX, it becomes even more important. Imagine a high-powered Ferrari without any gauges. Now, that might be inadvisable. So now what we're looking at today is talking about how NSX integrates with vRealize operations so that we have deeper prescriptive and dynamic insight into our networking ecosystem. We understand how virtual machines are performing and communicating with each other. We understand how to ensure that compliance is met and that we have policies configured appropriately across our networking enterprise. So without any further, let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do with NSX and vRealize operations integration. So today we're going to focus squarely on NSX integrations, specifically around operations. So NSX has a lot of integrations inside of the VMware stack, even into automation. We've talked about that a little bit before, and we'll get into it in more sessions to come. But today we're going to double-click directly into NSX and operations, and how vRealize operations helps us expand the extensibility of our insight into our infrastructure. Not just looking at what's happening with compute and storage, but also expanding out and having a whole new way to perceive what's going on inside of the network. There are some very specific operational requirements that NSX and operations management help us achieve. Multiple teams get involved in day two ops, and the things that they're needing every day, they need monitoring, they need advanced forms of troubleshooting, they need the ability to take a look at things like change assurance and configuration assurance and deal with compliance. And they also have needs surrounding capacity management, not just in their physical switches, but also in their logical switches. And vRealize operations management and the NSX and network integrations allow us to meet these needs head on. Software-defined networking has taken things to a whole new level. It's given us a tremendous amount of extensibility and flexibility, but it also means that we need more visibility into this space. Since we're dealing with virtual overlays, a lot of this could kind of get lost in the shuffle. And it also means that the physical underlay, the underpinning for all of this, needs even more scope into it. So we have to be able to check for things like security violations, vulnerability, compliance, capacity, consumption. All of this now becomes tantamount to the success of our network. vRealize network operations management makes this a reality for us by giving us the ability to look for root cause analysis, to be able to create correlations for stitching data together, for figuring out exactly where the problem occurs. Again, I've said it before, operations is about taking us from a space where we're trying to find a needle in a needle stack to being able to go to root cause analysis and to prevent IT from spending time locating the problem so that they can spend more time focusing on a proper resolution. The vRealize Operations NSX Management Pack, and there's going to be a link here right inside this video. What this does is this allows us the ability to extend flexibility for the APIs that we're able to monitor with. We're able to look at physical location of VMs, appliances. We're able to detect, flag physical network connectivity problems and even virtual network connectivity problems. We're able to identify instances that may or may not be affected, to view overall health in holistic ways, and to be able to expose this application traffic inside of specific views and to be able to see what the network operators are inside of that space. So take a quick look at some use cases for the NSX management pack inside of Ops. Being able to monitor logical physical networks, being able to monitor performance, bandwidth, switch traffic, load balancer performance, and be able to create troubleshooting around things like trace flow, out of sync issues, logical networking states, and then also be able to evaluate capacity for the physical and the virtual networking components. And then lastly, to ensure that we have configuration assurance. Maybe you have components that are or are not using single point failure, OSPF, or you have components that may or may not be using secure FTP. And we'll take a look at a couple of those in a really quick demonstration. So let's go ahead and have a look at a very quick demo around some of these functionalities so we have a little bit more scope into the power that vRealize Operations is bringing us with the management pack for NSX. So once you've got the NSX management packs loaded into Operations Manager, we're going to have access to a new set of dashboards. And the first is really going to be the vSphere main dashboard. And that's going to be the first place you kind of look for an overall operational aspect of all of the different capacities and things that are going on inside of your network. So things like health, performance, availability, the types of things that you'd look for inside of the compute space, you're going to look for inside of the networking space as well. We're able to switch between vSphere environments by clicking inside of the widget for NSX vSphere environments over here on the left-hand side. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this NSX NSBU standalone environment. So the top portion of this dashboard is giving us alerts, heat maps, and topology trees. The bottom section is showing us things like top consumers of network resources. So now, once we have this overarching view, and we can see how quickly we can define views within entire environments, we're able to go one step deeper and take a look at topologies. So we're going to go over here to the NSX vSphere Topology tab. So let's take a look at one of the most fundamental aspects of NSX, which is an NSX logical switch. So we're going to take a look at this guy right here. So inside of this, we can see that the dashboard has rendered a view for us wherein we're able to take a look at different objects inside of the vSphere topology. We can hover over individual links inside of the topology and we can view information about each one. We can see here that we have a host system, and then we can also see that we have leaf switches and interfaces that are connecting to us. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on this host system to see more. Now, once we do that, we can see that the metric charts are now showing additional statistics for that selected host down here. So once we have the host selected, now let's take a look at the logical router on this other side. The top issues widget down here below now reflects the selected logical router. Another key feature of the NSX management pack is configuration assurance. We talked about this with things like distributed firewalls a little bit earlier. So for example, comparing current NSX configuration against VMware best practices. And let's remember that with operations, it's not just about the best practices that are baked in, but we can also form and create our best practices through things like services integration and also tribal knowledge. So if components of the NSX environment are not aligning with best practice guidelines or things that we've identified and built inside of operations, alerts are going to trigger to advise us of the recommended settings for items that are out of compliance. So let's take a look at this one right here that says that we have an issue with backups. So we're going to double click into this and we can see that the backups are not using a secure FTP. So SFTP is a VMware best practice when we're backing up NSX management configurations. Obviously, we have very sensitive data inside that space. We want to make sure that the method and the modality with which they're being transferred and moved around is also secure. So because it's just using a regular insecure FTP, it's going to trigger the warning and it's also going to give us a recommended remediation. So we can also take a look at a little bit more inside of the configuration assurance. So let's take a look at one more thing inside of the management pack. So what we're going to do is we're going to look, we seem to have an error down here about an OSPF area. So we're going to take a look at this guy right here. And what we can see is that this rule is checking whether the OSPF on a logical router has been configured to use a secure authentication. And we can go down here into root cause and we can see that the logical router has not been configured to use MD5 authentication protocol, hence the triggered alert. And so we also are able to see the time and date when it was enabled on the logical router. And this gives us the capacity to start to look at not only what's going on, but when it might have happened. We took a look at a lot of things inside that demonstration, but there's even more capacity and capability that we have inside of this platform. So another great example is having configuration assurance inside of our distributed firewall rules. So you can see here inside of this one, we're able to identify things that could be potentially problematic for us inside of our distributed firewall rulings. And for those of you that are already familiar, the distributed firewall is what allows us to take advantage of one of NSX's killer applications, which is microsegmentation at the VM NIC level. But in addition to things like configuration assurance for something so important such as distributed firewalls, we're also able to look at things like load balancers and standards-based compliance inside of components within NSX. Just two more. You'll remember that earlier on I mentioned that we have the ability to watch capacity. And capacity not just for physical, but also for logical networks. And to be able to see the health and capacity of logical switches as well as physical switches means that the overarching scope for us within NSX is not just about the virtual layer. It's about integrating it into the rest of the data center, ensuring that we have an overarching holistic perspective into everything that's going on, and then growing that capability as we move forward into integrating additional technologies. Thanks for taking time to join me today. As always, I hope you found value in these sessions. We've got a lot of great content this quarter. Be sure to subscribe for more updates and videos, and follow me on Twitter for news and updates as they happen. We also have a lot going on inside of services here at VMware. Be sure to look into some of our great new services that are available. Things like the NSX Design and Deploy service, now available from VMware. And if you're a VMware partner, you need to look into our Partner Preferred Services program, where you too can deliver VMware services and learn from our services consultants and professionals inside of our professional services division, so that you can deliver and bring true value and the ultimate in VMware expertise directly to your customers as well. For all this information and more, be sure to follow me on Twitter and feel free to reach out, and we'll also be able to get you the information you need. Thanks again. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again really soon.